you, and you actually touched on this previously, is really around data, right? And obviously, data is central to a successful leveling program. You need to be able to track how your partners are performing against all of the requirements. But also, how can you use that data to identify potentially partners that are at risk? How can you use that to motivate partners to move up a level? And also, how can you use that data to optimize for the future? So I guess my question to you is, given your experience working with so many companies, have you seen anything innovative in terms of utilizing a more data-driven approach and using that data, as I say, to optimize any future program design?
Yep. Yeah, no, there's a lot to unpack in there, Margaret, and hopefully I can give some of the same answer that I gave previously. But yeah, so I suppose, a lot of what we do is all around the data, right? It's, at the end of the day, a leveling program should be 100% data driven. So if I back up a little bit, as I kind of said at the start, a leveling program allows us to differentiate partners based on key metrics, which is that data that you just alluded to. But those key metrics should align with the overall business's goal and strategy. Am I want to sell into a new region? What's my key product? Am I transitioning from on-premise to cloud, and so on? And then you kind of overlay that on top of, the point that not all partners are equal, but they're all important. And that's fundamentally, where your leveling program comes from, because you want to have a program that you can execute against those business requirements that enables you to differentiate the partners, but also to reward them and segment them into a manner that you can, focus on them to get the most out of them. So coming back to the data, typically there's lots of common requirements across pretty much all the programs we run, and there's many, many hundreds of programs. You're always going to see, call it revenue, bookings, opportunity data, whatever you want to call it. Certifications almost always, or training coming to data out of LMS systems comes into the mix as well. But again, you have to overlay on top of that, okay, what's your business type? What's your go-to-market strategy? Are you selling a pure product? Is it a service? Is it a mixture of products and services? And Natalia alluded earlier there to how their program has some service levers as well into it. And then ultimately, that should drive your partner engagement model. So I suppose, in today's ecosystem, some of the data requirements that we see are around things like revenue, compliance, deal registrations, opportunities, pipeline. But if you take a reseller, for an example, selling what we would call a traditional on-premise solution, there are some of the data requirements you need to take into account. Take the exact same reseller wearing a different hat, but now they're selling your equivalent cloud solution. You're going to have to add on a few additional data requirements, things like, what's adoption rates, what's your activation rates. You really want them to have high renewal rates, because you're going to all the trouble of helping that partner get to win those end customers. Now you want them to retain those end customers. So there's a lot of moving parts. And then I touched on it as well earlier there around, based on, maybe the partner type, the region you're selling into, the thresholds for those data points might be different, will be different based on region. So you throw all of that into the mix, and you have an engine then that calculates based on the partner that's logging in, what are their requirements? I have to get to $1 million of revenue. I have to have these 5 certs across these 4 different pillars. I have to register X number of deals to get to be a gold, silver, bronze partner, and so on. So what we do there in our world, I suppose, is help the vendors who are our customers to automate that entire process. And what that ultimately requires is that we get the data for the requirements. So if that's revenue, if it's deal reg, if it's bookings, whatever it is, if it's training, we feed those into what we call a leveling engine. And it in turn processes the requirements of that vendor based on the data that we have either directly on our tool or that we pull in from another system like Salesforce, like a Snowflake, like an SAP, like an Oracle, whatever it is, wherever that data comes from, we don't care. And then you spit all of that out, you do all of that kind of grunt work in the background. And from a partner experience, they see a nice, very simple single pane of glass or dashboard that they can see, here's the requirements of that vendor's programs, and here's where I sit based on my data against that. So I'm a gold partner, but guess what? I'm barely creeping in. I've got a cert that's about to expire, and if it expires, I slip to be a silver partner. Equally important is on the vendor side. So, we talk a lot about partners, but in today's economy and for the last couple of years, I suppose, channel teams have been more and more squeezed. We've seen more and more layoffs. Channel teams are always being asked to do more with less. So this is where, automation, a data-driven approach really helps the channel teams to now see, if I'm an account manager, I own 20 accounts, I should be able to see in a very easy to use way, how are each of my accounts doing? So when I'm having those conversations with the partners, I can tell them, hey, you need to do one more deal, you need to register another deal, you need to take another cert, you need another 100K of revenue to get to be gold. And if you do, guess what? You get additional discount, you get additional MDF dollars, and so on and so forth. So helping the partner on one side of the fence, but also helping the vendor or the account managers on the other side of the fence is really important. And I suppose the last piece then, Margaret, is both Dave and Natalia touched on it. Vendors are forever considering their programs and what changes do they need to make to the program to stay relevant, to stay up with their business needs, because they always have new products coming along. Dave just talked about an acquisition they've done where they have to bring two companies together, etc. So the programs are always evolving. But to help evolve those and have a data-driven approach, we would always say to vendors, you can model, having an engine to model your future programs needs is a really important thing, because anybody that's ever built a program on a spreadsheet will realize it's countless hours of work. It literally takes weeks and weeks. And then somebody will come along and say, well, what if I made this one change or that one change? And you're just pulling your hair out because you've got to go back and do more weeks of work, versus having a very automated engine that you can change a rule, hit a go button, and it relevels all your partners in a matter of minutes to see, if I moved my revenue threshold in North America from 1 million to 1.2 million, how many partners moved from gold to silver? Or if I moved it down to 800K, how many moved from silver to gold? Because that impacts your cost of going to market. Ultimately, you're now going to give out additional discount or less discount based on where your partners land. So a lot there, Margaret, but hopefully that kind of helps why a data-driven approach is important and all the different types of data that come into the mix. And I guess I only touched on some of them.
Yeah, and I guess massively important for finance and budgeting, right? I mean, how do you have budgetary control if you can't see what, or at least predict to some degree what that impact or change will be? Yeah. Natalia, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just can underline how important automation is, because we came obviously from a completely manual leveling process many years ago, and it is nothing you want to pursue. So anything for me, whenever I want to implement a new program, my number one priority is, do I have data to measure it on, and can I automate it? Truly, if I can't measure it, if I cannot automate it, I'm not going to implement it. That's as simple as that. To me, it's key. There is no other way around it. I'm not doing anything manual and trying to measure on spreadsheets, etc. So to me, it's key, and everything underlines, what Kenneth just explored. Yeah.
Yeah, for us, it was we've implemented. Similarly, we're so similar with our programs. We've also kind of migrated from what was a manual process to having the level information available both to us internally, but also available for the partners to see. It's also, it's an incentive. It's kind of a gamification for them to see it and be able to move to the next level. But at the same time, I mean, and we built it. I mean, oddly, Kenneth, I mean, when we partnered up with you guys, I didn't. This was not even on my list, right? So we were looking at incentive programs. Having a dashboard of what the leveling looks like was a bonus that was something you guys provided. But it saved our butts. I mean, oh my God, the number of individual reports that we used to run for our CAM leaders, every one of them would be like, oh, my partner wants to know how close they are, and it's the end of the year, it's getting close to the end of the year, and releveling, and where are they? Do they have their certifications? Do they have the and it was almost everything was an individual manual request. And this just, now we can point both the partners and the internal CAMs and everybody to a dashboard, and it just saves us so much time. We're operating much more efficiently. I'm like you, Natalia, if we can't, it's close to full automation. We still do some exports and imports. We still do some moving around to get all the data there. But much of it is automated, and that it's just been a lifesaver on efficiency. So.
And one important point that that Kenneth mentioned before, the finance requirements, they are also increasing, and they are more diverse than before. They're asking different things. It's not just one number. It's how much is the service piece of whatever you're paying out, how much is the product piece, how much is subscription of that. So the requirements of whatever we pay on, what the partners bring us, is those requirements are increasing, and they are very, they're very nitty and gritty, and it's great when you can pull them from something. And if you have everything database, then you can also pull the data out. So that's very.
And I think great. Way back in the beginning, you mentioned compliance, which you don't even think about, but the same thing. So finance is looking for what did you pay out, but they are also looking for like a database of record of how those things were paid out, and was it paid out appropriately? Do you have the right documentation? And that also has become important. As are you, how are you with your financial compliance?
Yeah, I think Margaret, like that's really great. What Natalia and Dave have alluded to there really boils down to then ultimately partner engagement, because as Dave said, before we automated all of this, people were sending out emails or getting requests. So you can imagine the overhead, and especially when you scale your channel up, and next thing you have hundreds, and in many cases thousands of partners. It's impossible, especially when the channel teams get squeezed. But having it done in an automated way is also really good from a partner perspective. It makes you look a lot more professional. It's easier to engage with them, and it's much more akin to becoming a sales-focused organization. So your account managers now are sales-focused. Everybody is looking at the one thing and say, well, you do one more deal, you get gold, you get a discount. You do one less deal, you slip to silver, etc. So now the account managers are talking the partner language rather than running around doing spreadsheets and operational type work. And kind of the more mature vendors we've been working with for a while, some of the cool stuff they're doing is they look at the leveling and they say, okay, these are our top partners. How do we figure out who are our next 20 or 100 top partners below that top, the old 80-20 rule or 90-10 rule as it often is? How can I take the next level down and work with those to become the next top 100 or 20 partners, whatever it is that you decide to do? And having the leveling automated really has enabled those vendors to generate a lot more revenue out of partners that they wouldn't even have known before that their characteristics were very close to their top partners.
Yeah, it's a great way to use that data, right? And how do you prioritize on that next level down? Yeah, fantastic insights from everybody. Super useful, I think. And so my question, and I'll pose this to all of you. We'll start with you, Dave, and then to Kenneth, and then Natalia. What would be your one piece of advice to ensure partner engagement and to ensure the partners have a positive experience from participating in your program?